What makes for a healthy workplace culture? Now, this question gets asked many times and it gets answered in almost just as many different ways. Welcome, Summit Chasers, to another episode of the Summit Chasers podcast, where we welcome a now good friend of mine, Jim Mayer, who's the host of the Manufacturer Culture podcast. He breaks down how you can tell if you have a healthy culture and some strategies you can implement to create that healthy culture. And we dive into some, I want to say, some pretty hot topics around going into trades versus traditional education. I may or may not have put my foot in my mouth a few times, but I will let you decide that for yourselves. So sit back, get your notebooks out, grab a Georgie energy drink, maybe grab a salmon burger, and enjoy the show. Jim, thank you for jumping on, my friend. Whether you know this or not, good friend of mine. I've been on his podcast. You're the host of the Manufacturing Culture podcast and founder of TCO Strategies. So very happy to have you, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Zach. I've been looking forward to this one all week. It's popped up as a reminder about a week ago, and I said, all right, I'm excited for this one. I had forgotten that we had booked it, but when the reminder came up, I was like, dang, this is going to be great.
Well, you had booked this, like I think we said, because I was on yours about 6 weeks ago. We were just talking about that, and then you booked it, a month or so in advance, and then things happen. So, but it was a nice surprise because I saw it too. I saw, I got Jim today. Yes, like let's go. Like, well, it's nice.
This is going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's nice. Like, I love talking to everybody. This is my favorite thing. It quickly became my favorite thing about doing these shows is just talking to people, learning, and then just meeting the type of people that you can meet, network with.
Yeah.
Like, I just did an interview with Tom Dusenberry, who used to be, he was the former CEO of Hasbro Interactive. So I interviewed the guy that was in charge of my childhood. Dude. And I didn't know. So I was like, so it's cool, but like, those are the interactions that I love.
So the old saying goes, you should never meet your heroes. And I'm not saying that he was necessarily one of your heroes, but did he, as somebody who shaped your childhood, did he live up to the billing?
More than that, because because when you're a kid, right, you're like, because he helped produce Monopoly. Like, he's that guy. I know, it was amazing. So when I was doing my research on him, you immediately put him on this pedestal.
Yeah.
So and when you do that with people, you start to create your own stories of them. Like, he must be larger than life, right? But he is the most humble guy.
That's
and immediately awesome. I had another guest named Liam. His episode's live in the Startup Success Series, and he is creating a game that helps kids with develop communication. Like, if they have communication disabilities, autism, Asperger's, that kind of stuff, the game helps them develop communication skills. So I was like, this would be like an amazing connection. And right away, Tom very quickly got back to Liam when I connected them, and he's like, here's my email, let's connect. Like, I want to help. So it's really, so you have a guy who's done that kind of stuff with his life and accomplished that, who then just he's on a random interview, probably just quite a few of them, to then take that and take that, Liam under his wing. It's just so cool. So yeah, no, long story short, he definitely lived up to it and then some.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that story. All right, cool. What are we going to talk about today, Zach?
That's a great question. I was hoping you had that. No, I'm joking.
No, that was on my show, man.
That was on your show? Oh, sorry. I got
confused.
I got confused. I'm not cutting any of this, by the way. But tell them, I might cut a little bit at the beginning, but yeah, that's fine. But Jim, so before we get into the meat and potatoes, tell everybody really quickly a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I've been in skilled trades or manufacturing for over 20 years. I dropped out of high school, or not high school. Sorry. I dropped out of college after one semester, finished high school. I tried college for a semester at Arizona State. It wasn't for me. I was part of the generation that probably should have gone to trade school instead of going to university right out of high school, right? So I went and spent a bunch of money for a semester and didn't know what I wanted to do. So I left and started doing odd jobs. One that stuck was construction. I built houses. And that's how I ultimately got into the skilled trades. Worked for a distributor of construction supplies after I was done building houses, and that's when I walked in my first machine shop. And man, it was amazing. The sights, the smells, the sounds of a machine shop were quickly in my blood, and haven't left. And that was about 20 years ago, 2004, when I walked in my first machine shop. And here we are. I've done everything from work with distribution to work on the nonprofit side, to work for OEMs, making the tooling and the supplies that machine shops need, to starting my own company. I did my own thing for a couple of years part-time on the side, and in 2022 had an opportunity to take that full-time, make it into a business, and I've been working to scale that since. And in the process of the last 2 years, started a podcast, which we've talked about, and you were a guest on the Manufacturing Culture podcast. So it's been a fun journey, man. I've failed a lot along the way, made a lot of mistakes, made some bad choices, people and substance wise. And here I am at 45, and I feel like I'm in the prime of my life, man. I'm loving every minute of it.
I would agree. You look like you're in the prime of your life too.
Thanks,
For
man.
those of you that are listening, just take my word for it.
A little
Salt and
gray in the
pepper.
beard, but yeah,
Salt and pepper.
I got a haircut once I realized that I was going to be on this, and it was a video. I got a haircut for this, so I'm all nice and trimmed today for you.
No, I appreciate that. I'm sure everybody else appreciates it too. But that you brought up kind of a hot topic was the trades right now.
Yeah,
Like, there's a big shortage of workers going into trades right now, and I actually did a talk here in Arkansas. Went to a couple schools and talking about, there's other options other than, going and spending a bunch of money getting an MBA and that kind of stuff, because that's one of our I wouldn't say passion, but it's one of our messages, right? Like, you can be successful without spending, getting $200,000 in debt. But there's a big shortage of in people going into the trade. So what have you seen? Where is that at? And what have you kind of seen, especially in the manufacturing industry or in the world? How has that affected things?
Yeah. So the skills gap, as we call it in manufacturing, it's existed as long as I can remember in this industry. We've talked about it, right? And the whole concept behind the skills gap is that by 2030, we're going to be anywhere, depending on what study you look at, 2.4 to 2.5 million machinists short in this country, because the baby boomers are retiring and there aren't enough Gen Xers to fill those roles. And the baby boomers and Gen Xers didn't do a good enough job getting younger people interested in skilled trades. So we're facing this massive machinist shortage, and it's going to come to fruition as these baby boomers are retiring in the next 4 to 5 years at this point. So we've got this massive shortage. There have been a lot of efforts to get younger and younger kids interested in manufacturing, which is wonderful and definitely needs to continue to be an approach. But the biggest issue is manufacturers, machine shops, they need people now. They can't wait until somebody who's in 6th or 7th grade right now is in the workforce, right? Because then you're looking at 6 to 7 years, which, again, great for the long-term success of the industry, but it's not doing a whole lot to address the issues right now. So there's still a lot of people who aren't fully able to staff their companies. There are a lot of people who are turning to automation. There are a lot of people who are turning to solutions like I offer on the cultural side, right? Because if you create a healthy culture, you can then start attracting and keeping people in place, right? So there's a lot of different approaches right now to solving this. There's no silver bullet, unfortunately, but there's a lot of different solutions that have been put forth. And we'll make it. It'll just be a lean couple of years until we start to see a little bit more volume of people graduating and going into the trades automatically.
Yeah, it's an interesting ebb and flow of humanity. Like you said, like the baby boomers, they a lot of them went into trades, right? Especially like after the war,
Yeah,
right? A lot of them went into the trades because it was very glorified at the time, right? Because they're
yeah,
what kept the machine going. And then their kind of message was, I work so hard so that you don't have to, so that I can send you to college to do. So no, that's the new message.
yep,
Go to college, which is great. I'm not saying not, but go to college, get a good job right out of college, raise a family, and so you don't have to work as I worked hard, so you don't have to work as hard,
exactly.
right? But
Yep,
that like this, the trades that it's still to this day, it keeps the train, it keeps the machine going. It's that's for all of our parts. That's like vehicles, our homes, like yeah, all these pieces were like they were manufactured in
yep,
the in the industry, oil, gas. Say what you want about
everything.
coal, but even everything, absolutely everything. So when that gap happens, we're going to have to, in order to keep it going, we're either going to have more unskilled laborers in there, so therefore quality is going to go down, or we go to complete automation. And we go to complete automation, by the time that next generation who is getting into the trades is in there, now there's not going to be any jobs.
Right.
It's a very interesting. Go ahead.
And I'll take it a step further, Zach. To me, the U.S. was built on the middle class, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the middle class was built on the backs of manufacturing, right? And so over the last, I want to say, decade and a half to 2 decades, we've seen a massive contraction of the middle class. And it follows the same trajectory of the contraction that we've seen in manufacturing in this country. Now, some of that was due to offshoring, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can't blame parents 100% for the contraction of manufacturing and therefore the middle class in this country, because companies got greedy. They were looking for cheaper labor and they sent jobs overseas. Um, that led to a lot of the contraction as well, right? So there's a multi-pronged approach. But in order to truly build the US back into what a lot of people say were our glory days as a country, we have to bring manufacturing jobs back to this country, and we have to start staffing those companies with middle class skilled workers, and we will get back to a robust place in this country that is as good of or better than we've ever been. Economic standing. There's still some other things that need to be ironed out
Mm-hmm.
socio wise, but as far as economically, we need to bring manufacturing back to really see this country start to take off in the direction we all want it to.
Mm-hmm. This might be an interesting hot take, but it was almost like culturally, that middle class skilled worker manufacturing, it's almost seen as not sexy.
Oh,
Whereas
absolutely.
innovation, technology, that is very sexy. And there was
Yeah.
a great interview, and I can't remember if it was on Joe Rogan's podcast, where Elon Musk was talking about the truck. I believe he
Hmm.
was talking about the truck and how designing the truck, and Joe was really pushing him, like, how hard was it to design this and getting everything
Yep.
right, the bulletproof glass and all this kind of stuff. That's sexy. It's cool. It's
Hmm.
bells and whistles. But then Elon Musk made a great point that I think needs to get blasted out a lot more. It's that the truly impressive feat is not the design; it's in how you produce it. It's in manufacturing it. Like
Yeah.
that's where it's like when he said, I think he was using like the invention of the car is not as impressive as the invention of the manufacturing plant. Like
Yeah.
that was actually
I'd agree.
much more impressive, right? So
Yeah.
it's almost like how can we make it? How can we make manufacturing sexy again, Jim?
Um, well, what we have to do is we have to show it as a sustainable career pathway, right? And those words alone aren't sexy per se. But it can help break generational curses, right? When we look at disadvantaged communities in any city, I'm in Phoenix, and we have multiple disadvantaged communities here locally, right? Um, a job in manufacturing could be the difference between a pathway starting at $16 to $20 an hour to getting to $26 to $35 an hour within the first couple years of working, versus throwing boxes for Amazon, flipping burgers at Burger King, right?
Mhm.
These are careers that historically, or not historically, but in the last 20 years or so, have been synonymous with each other, right? That people
Mhm.
have looked at jobs in manufacturing facilities as synonymous with burger flipping, and it's not the same thing. It's a very skilled job, right? And so we need to highlight the skilled part of skilled trades, right?
Mhm.
So for so long we've focused on the 3Ds, the dark, dirty, dangerous part of manufacturing. We need to get rid of that mindset and start thinking about how these craftspeople are physically making things with their hands day in and day out. And that's pretty fucking cool. Pardon my language, but it's pretty fucking cool. Um, and so that's how we make it sexy. We have to take the idea of working with our hands and creating something. That's what we have to make sexy again, because that walks hand in hand with manufacturing.
There it is. No, I 100% absolutely agree. And it's so, one of the things too is that it's such character building too. Like we look at all these
Yeah.
people who are successful today who, have the spotlight and whatever it is. Like a lot of them came from tougher, I'm not saying you have to have a tough upbringing or anything like that, but they grind. But they had a season in their life where they had to
Yep.
grind, where they had to learn these things. And there's really, I can't think of much. I mean, there's a few that may be compared, but in a manufacturing setting, the amount of skills you can learn, the amount of skills you can develop, whether it's hard or
Yeah.
soft skills, like whether it's, just specifically, like I worked with like roofing and windows, right? Well,
Yep.
those are some of our clients. It's not just, how to put glass into a frame. It's not just about,
Right.
putting the sliders. It's not just about that. It's all the little skills that you're learning along the way, and then having to teamwork. Like
Yep.
I can't think of much else where learning how to work in a team is much more important, because if one cog's out of place, everybody else is, the rest of it's out of place. So like you have to really be able to work together. It has to be on the fly communication. Um,
Absolutely.
like the skills that you can develop, or really it's insane. And if you, whether you're just starting out or you want to be, that to be your career, um, I think the skills that you develop, just life skills in general that you can develop in that setting is, I mean, it's better than most, probably, well, yeah, most college degrees. I don't want
Oh,
to put my foot in
without
my
a
mouth
doubt.
too much, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Hmm.
mean, college is great. University is great. Let me rephrase that. University is great for some people. But the idea that everybody should go to university is asinine. If anything, I mean, we've heard the talk over the last decade or so about free education, free higher education, free college, free university, right? If you want to make anything free, any politician that's listening to Summit Chasers podcast, if you want to make anything free when it comes to higher education, make it a trade school. Make it machinist programs, make it carpentry, make it plumbing, make it HVAC, make it electrical, because those are going to be the foundations for future success. If you start off as a machinist at 18, you go through a 2 year or 3 year apprenticeship program, you get your associates and your card carrying machinist at the end of it, and you turn 30 years old, you're working for a company, you're like, man, I really am now interested in accounting. You've got, to your point, the discipline, the character to go get that advanced degree, and you're more focused. It's not going to get a degree just because you think you need to get a 4 year degree and then you're bored for the rest of your life. You're in a trade that you love because you've been in it for 10 years at that point, but you've found a focus within that trade that you love so much. It may not be operating a CNC machine or working in the quality department or R&D, but if you are in that facility and you have passion for what you're doing, you're going to continue to make a difference.
Yeah.
Right?
No, and then there's the financial part of it. Like you go to get, just using an MBA as an example, I mean, you're $100,000 to $200,000 in debt.
Yeah.
You go to a trade school. I offhand, I don't know how much, going to, getting a, going through your apprenticeship. You're working through it the whole time too.
Yep.
Like you're paying your way out of debt the whole time, and it's nowhere near as much money. So not just are you educating yourself, getting real life experience, learning all these hard and soft skills, you're making pretty good money too. Like if
Absolutely.
if you're in a fourth year, fifth year electrician, like you're making $100,000-$200,000 a year.
Absolutely.
Like you're not in debt, and then you're
No.
learning these skills, and also there's a lot. You probably learn more about business working for a small electrical company,
Yep.
than you do an MBA. Like tangible skills. Like
Yeah.
like if you have an MBA, okay, you learn theory on mergers and acquisitions, right? But if you've never done one,
Yeah.
like shut up.
Yeah.
No offense.
Exactly.
Right? Like you don't know. You don't know how those conversations really go. Like what if you're having to negotiate with somebody who's negotiated 10 other mergers and is a bit of an asshole, woke up on the wrong side of the bed that day, did 2 other negotiations earlier that day. This is your first one, and all you've read is a textbook.
Right.
What are you going to do? Like
You're in big trouble.
You can't. You're in huge trouble. And then if you're, again, you get into these trades, whether you're like my brother's, he's a machinist foreman now, and he knows more about accounting, more about managing, more about the importance of flow when you're on an assembly line, when you're working on a line like that, when your team has to work together so cohesively, than most people who work in office jobs and have a bachelor's degree and whatever, right? Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'd also like to see the stats on how many people go into trades to do plumbing or whatever, construction, carpentry, that come out and do plumbing, construction, carpentry, that kind of thing. And then the people that go to college get a Bachelor of Arts and come out and, do that thing that are
or
directly
are doing plumbing or electrical or construction, right? I mean,
exactly.
a lot of times people are going to university and finding themselves in the service industry. They're finding themselves in the skilled trades industries, the hospitality industry, right? Because there aren't enough accountant jobs out there for everybody who goes to accounting school. There aren't enough theater production jobs for everybody who goes to theater production school. You know what there are enough jobs for? Machinists, right? Every machinist that I know that goes through a program, they end up with a job. And typically, to your point earlier, their career, or their college, which is typically about $2,000 a year for associate's degree, typically that's fully paid for by their prospective employer. So their college is paid for. They're, to your point, learning while they're earning in apprenticeship programs. They finish their program and they're making $26 to $30 an hour after 3 years. So you're 21 years old. You're making $30 an hour with zero debt. Sounds pretty sweet to me, right?
Yeah.
I just and you can even I'm part of an organization here in Arizona. We're called Skill Up Arizona. It's a apprenticeship and scholarship foundation. So even for those apprentices and students who don't have that company already lined up that they're going to go work for, they can apply for a scholarship or apply to become an apprentice through our program, and we will absorb the cost of getting them the learning that they need to be making that $26 to $30 when they're done, right? So there are organizations in every state and every municipality that are working towards these goals.
That's amazing. When did you start that?
I started, I was asked to join at the beginning of 23. It was an organization that used to be called AZPMAP, Arizona Precision Manufacturing Apprenticeship Program. It was a mouthful. Nobody could say it. Nobody knew what we did. So we rebranded to Skill Up Arizona at the beginning of 23. And actually, just late last week, they nominated and elected me president of the board for this organization. So I'm now, yeah, thank you. So now I'm leading the charge here. We're going into more disadvantaged communities. We're going after more grant money to get more kids interested in these careers out here in Arizona than we've ever had before. So looking forward to it. It'll be fun.
No, that's an amazing, I mean, that's an incredible mission. I mean, you're literally helping our future directly.
Yeah,
Like that.
absolutely.
Again, if we don't have these trades, we're going to see what kind of trouble that we're in.
Yeah.
Right. So that's awesome. That's awesome,
Yeah.
Jim.
Thank you.
But so shifting to, so obviously we hit that nail on the head probably quite a bit. But here, like, you have a pretty, I think it's more niche than, and we said this before, it's more niche than
Yeah.
it probably on the surface is perceived as, which is culture in manufacturing.
Yeah.
And culture in general is kind of a hot topic, right? Especially since people are coming back from COVID. A lot of businesses and corporations they're making that focus, they're making culture a focus to help bring people back into the office and working more productively. And I think they really saw that as a pain point because they brought people back in. They're
Yeah.
not used to working in a team or being around people anymore. So culture's been kind of a big topic. But for you, I got a question though. For you, why specifically manufacturing culture?
Yeah. So great question. Because I love this industry. I mean, going back to how I got into this industry, walking into my first machine shop, um, there's something about the sound that metal makes when it's cutting other metal, right? When you hear that insert cutting a chip on a piece of metal, or the sounds of the CNC machine, the smell of the coolant when you walk into a facility, just got into my blood, man. And uh, my wife, as I ended up going back and getting a bachelor's and then an MBA, and taking on that debt, but for a purpose. Um, it, my wife always said that she asked me if manufacturing was a best route to utilize these skill sets that I had developed, right? And I I've told her then, and I'll tell her now if she were to ask. She doesn't bring it up anymore, but if she were to ask it, this industry is in my blood. I can't not try and make this industry better. I believe in what I've said earlier on this in this earlier segment, right? Manufacturing built the middle class, and the middle class built this country, and
Mm.
so I didn't serve in the military. I'm not rich enough to financially support programs. So the way that I am able to serve my country, my neighborhood, my locality, my region, whatever, is by serving as an ambassador, as an advocate for the manufacturing industry. I will tell anybody until I'm blue in the face about jobs in this industry. So while culture could have been taken more broad as a concept, I really wanted to focus on the idea that manufacturing can be the robust industry that it needs to be.
Beautiful. Was there a problem that you specifically identified in manufacturing that culture could ultimately either fix or alleviate?
Well, yeah. I mean, uh, when I was working for the nonprofit, it was 2019. I was going on a trip we went from Munich to Milan. We toured 5 different manufacturing facilities over 5 days. Um, and really got to know some of the members of the nonprofit. We didn't take everybody; it was a limited trip, right? But the ones that were there, I heard a lot of and this was pre-COVID. Nobody wants to work, can't find anybody, and started talking to some of those owners and managers and supervisors and that were on the trip, and about why they felt they couldn't find people. And it turns out that these people were paying employees like it was 1950. They were treating them like it was 1970, right? They weren't creating great places to work. Not to say that there isn't a need for more people in the industry, which we've already covered, but in order for people to start with a company and then stay with a company, there has to be an alignment, right? And that's where the culture comes in. Every company, pardon me, Zach, every company ultimately has a culture, whether they know it or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my job to judge whether a company's culture is healthy or not, because culture is based on the alignment of values between the organization and the individual employee. So, what may be super healthy to me may be super toxic to you, and vice versa, right? It's all on how we act individualistically and how our individualistic values align with whatever companies are out there. So, my job, again, isn't to judge, hey, uh, manufacturer XYZ, you've got a horrible culture. My job is to say, hey, manufacturer XYZ, you've had 40% turnover. Do you know why that is? No? Okay. Well, let's walk through. Do you have a defined mission, vision, and values, right? Because that is the bedrock to creating that whole healthy culture. Uh, do you do exit interviews? Do you do, how is your onboarding process? There's a litany of things that create a culture within that framework, right? But ultimately, starting with, do you have a mission, vision, and values? That's a way to go.
Mm-hmm. That's a great place to start,
Yeah.
because then you know where you're pushing everybody, and everybody knows where they're being led. If you
Yeah.
don't have a North Star, then they're just there. Now they come to work, and all in their mind, all they're doing is, I'm drilling this hole, or I'm doing this. There's no team
Absolutely.
cohesiveness. And actually, since the last time we talked, I kind of had a bit of an epiphany when it came to like manufacturing culture specifically, because again, I was so fast. It's so specific, but
Yeah.
it really is. Again, I'm Canadian, so I'm not a huge. No, I'm not very knowledgeable on football, but it's very much like a football team.
Yeah.
And I was at an event and Tom Brady was speaking, and he said culture was everything. Everybody plays their role, right?
Yep.
I'm the quarterback. I couldn't be a lineman.
Yep.
We're both equally as important, though. I couldn't be the running
Absolutely.
back, right? A running back couldn't be a lineman, right? Or whatever it is, right? Do all the analogies you guys want. You guys know football better than
Mm-hmm.
me. But when you're in everyone has to play. Everyone has a role to play, right? And they have their strengths, they have their weaknesses, and you try to mitigate the weaknesses, play to your strengths. But just like a football team, everyone has the same goal. At least they should. Just to
Yeah.
win a championship, win the game, support the team, do what's best for the team. And then in manufacturing, where it's similar to football, where that starts to fall apart is when somebody cares about their stats more than the outcome the team creates,
Yep.
right? But it all starts with starts with the leader,
Yep.
aligning everybody on that kind of that North Star sort of things. And you kind of answered, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to expand on that. It's very similar to that, right? But lives can be at stake, right? So the difference between a football team and manufacturing is a football team isn't making parts that go in an airplane 30,000 feet in the air or a mile below sea level or into vehicles that we transport our children in every day. If we don't show up in manufacturing and are on our A game every day, we can put lives at risk depending on what industry we're in, right? There's medical device manufacturing, there's auto, there's aerospace, there's defense, all of that. If you have a bad day on a football field, you throw an interception, you lose a playoff game, the world continues, right?
Mm.
You have a bad day in manufacturing, you can potentially put lives at risk, right? So
Yeah.
it's really super important for these companies to define that mission, vision, and
Mhm.
values to get people to show up at their best every day, because lives can be at risk.
Yeah, and there's a great story I just read about that, and it was Winston Churchill during World War II, where there was a lot of the coal miners were going on strike because they wanted to be part of the glorified, they wanted to be in the military because they were
Yeah,
glorified at the time. They were seen
absolutely.
as gods, right? And they're stuck in the coal mine, and they felt like they weren't contributing, so they
Yep.
were, the production was going down. There was people, there was a little bit of riots apparently, but so what Winston Churchill did, and he's an amazing example of leadership if you look at some of the things that he did,
Oh,
or a lot of the
absolutely.
things that he did. But what he did is he brought a many of them over to a manufacturing plant. I can't remember what they were building, but he brought them over to the manufacturing plant, and he explained to them, this is what, because you're doing this, we're able to do this, and because of this, you're saving their lives, you're helping us in this effort, you're helping us, and if we don't, this is what could happen.
Yeah.
This is the outcome. If you guys don't do what you do, you guys are running the ship. And
Yep.
if this fails, we all fail. And
Yep.
then production, everybody went back with, they understood their mission, they understood the importance of what they're doing and the outcome that it creates, and the outcome if they don't do what they're doing. Right. So I
Yeah.
think that's a great example of what you just alluded to, of, if as long as they, like, you have to have that in the forefront. This is the outcome that you're creating, and this is what could happen if we fail.
Yeah.
And
And let's be real. Everybody fails, right? Failure is inevitable. It's a certainty in life. Nobody's perfect 100% of the time. It's how do you learn from that? How quickly can you catch it? And how quickly can you catch it? How are you accountable for it? And how quickly can you learn from it, right?
mhm,
Because if you don't catch it before it goes to the OEM, if you're a tier 2 machine shop, if you don't catch that failure until it makes it to the OEM, then it could go into a vehicle, right? Let's use auto manufacturing as an example. If you catch it in your facility but you don't take accountability for it, if you don't take responsibility for it, then it can still end up going out because nobody may not know that you've made a bad part, right? And how quickly are you learning from it? That's how that's defining your character, and how are you able to grow from mistakes that you make instead of beat yourself up and say, oh, I made the mistake. Are you able to say, okay, I should have approached the work piece from this angle with this feed and speed instead of this one, and put those notes into the system
mhm.
so you don't make the same mistake the next time, right?
Yeah.
That's so we can't harp on the fact that failure is bad, because then people won't want to get into this trade either. It's how do you check for failure and how do you move on from failure that I think is important as well.
Yeah, I think it's only failure if you don't learn from it. But I think, especially in manufacturing, when the stakes are higher, it's only a failure if you don't have a process on which you learn from the failures, in which you implement the
Yeah.
improvement upon the failure. I think, like, you can learn from it. It's like, oh, I'm not going to do that again. Okay, but now what's the process so we don't? Like,
Exactly.
what's the documentation? Who has to get involved? What kind of conversation? Who makes the decisions and all this kind
Yep.
of stuff? So having it when you're in a manufacturing setting and you're running a plant, it's okay. We identified a failure. Now, what's my process to identify what's the cause of it, and then what's my process
Absolutely.
to make sure it doesn't happen again, so we can get back to that? Because the goal really, what's the Six Sigma? It's like 99.997 or 996%
Yep.
success. How can I make that 998? How can I make
Exactly.
it 99? Right?
Yep.
And then that could be the difference, right, between one in
Yep.
1,000 and one in 10,000,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely.
So what you kind of alluded to this, that, like, it's none of our business to identify what is healthy culture for this company and this company, especially if they're so
Yep.
different, right? But based on a lot of your conversations, because obviously this is the root point of your podcast, but based on the conversations you've had, the people you've had on, what is like a good, or a few good main indicators that, like, okay, this company has a healthy culture, even though it might be different than this one, but it's still, for this company, this is a healthy culture.
Yeah. So uh a couple of things that always jump out at me when I walk into a facility, right, is um, a are the machinists or machine operators, if it's not a precision machining shop, are the operators or machinists able to interact with guests? I know as soon as I walk into a facility how their culture is based on whether I have machinists turn around from their machines, look up at me, or if they're looking at their shoes because they're afraid to interact with the guest that's on the floor, right? That's the number one indicator to me whether it's a healthy place to work or not. Number two is, are the mission, vision, and values on the wall, right? Are these something that you guys not only talk about, but you look at every day and you live every day? If those three things are there and they're lived and they're seen every day and they're practiced, then there's a good culture. The third thing I look for, I always look at the bathrooms at manufacturing facilities. How clean are the bathrooms? You can tell a whole lot about how much somebody cares about the company they work for based on the quality that they leave the bathroom in. If they trash the bathroom, they have very little respect for the organization that they're working for, and there's a lot of work to be done there. If the bathrooms are clean and tidy and people are willing to clean up after themselves, then there's a pretty good culture there, right? And those are just surface level, what I look to kind of gauge how deep I need to dive into cultural conversations. If I walk into a facility and machinists are high-fiving me as I walk in the door and there's mission, vision, and values everywhere and the bathrooms are clean, I take a much different approach than the opposite scenario,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Gotcha. At that point, you're playing more defense. How do we keep this and how do we grow this, as opposed to how do
Absolutely.
we create it?
Absolutely.
How? What's like? This is an interesting question that popped into my head. So, what would be if you're a manager, you're running it, you're a plant manager. How do you identify? Because again, a lot of people want to hide, right? If they're unhappy in their job or they have,
Yeah.
they're complaining about something. Sometimes they'll just keep it to themselves, like it's not my business. I'm just going to keep to my lane, sort of thing. But what is a good indicator that these plant managers can kind of identify? Like, okay, I need to work on like culture is an issue. This is something I need to focus on right now.
Yeah. I mean, my advice is always, if you have to ask that question, then you need to focus on culture, right? And that's kind of tongue in cheek. I think everybody should focus on their culture, whether they've got a great one or not, whether they've got the culture that they want or not, right? I guess is a better way to put it, because uh, I could walk into a shop that's, high fives, clean bathrooms, mission, vision, values are on the wall, but they don't have the culture they want. They've got a great culture, but they don't have the culture they want, right? So a lot of companies, they can't define what their culture currently is, and they also can't define what the culture is that they want. They just know they want more revenue. They know they want more spindle utilization. They know they want less scrap. They know they want less turnover. They know they want these things. They don't know how to frame their culture to accomplish those things.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Like your culture has to fit the outcome you're trying to achieve. It's similar
Absolutely.
to like the hiring concept. So we have a framework for hiring key players. Is a lot of times these businesses or business owners or employers or managers, they go out and they hire for a role, but they don't actually understand or they haven't identified, they're not clear on what success in that role really looks like. What is it going to take to succeed? What's the outcome we're looking for? They just see, okay, I need to hire a sales manager, so I'm going to go find somebody who has sales manager on their resume and has a few
Yep.
years of experience, but they don't have it very clearly defined. We need this type of avatar, this type of person to achieve this specific outcome. So same thing
Yep.
with culture. We need this specific type of culture because we need this specific outcome. I love that example. You could walk into a manufacturing plant, everyone's high fiving each other, they're hugging, they're talking shit to each other, everyone's getting along, but that's not conducive to maybe it's running a tight ship and increasing revenue
Yep.
while decreasing defects. type of thing,
Absolutely.
right?
Yep.
That's really great advice. Really great advice. But Jim, I always have a
Yeah.
question. I have a few questions that I end with, my friend.
All right. I love it.
But Jim, what is the next summit that you are chasing, my friend?
That's a great question, Zach, and it's kind of, I mean, what a better place to announce it than on your podcast. I am going through a transition with my company right now, and so I am going from more of the consulting based side of the culture, which has been a Sisyphean journey at best. I push water uphill every day. I've started partnering with products, goods, software, whatever, that promote healthy culture. And so I'm really pouring a lot more effort into being a solutions provider. Um, that being said, the summit that I'm chasing, Zach, is to scale that to the point where I can do the podcast more full time. That's the summit that I'm chasing. I have found so much joy in creating the content that I create and the impact that it's having on the people who listen and watch and read now, that I want to get my world to where that's what I'm working on full time, where I'm devoting more of my time to that than uh, the other stuff.
I love it. And anything we can do to support that, we got you. That's
All right,
amazing.
man. I
Identifying
love
what
it.
you truly want to do and the passion for it, get the plan and go for it.
Yeah.
I love it. But where can everybody find you? Take 30 seconds, take a minute even. Plug away, my friend.
Uh, awesome. So yeah, I can be found TCOstrategies.com. That's the solution side. I'm going to say it instead of the consulting side. It's the solution side of what I do. You can find everything from apprenticeship programs to learning continuums to software platforms to assessments and LMS trainings right there on the TCO Strategies website. You can find me at the Manufacturing Culture Podcast website. Probably the easiest and best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I am there as James parentheses Jim Mayer. Just because I've gone by both professionally in the last decade, I felt the need to have both of them on there, right? So that's the easiest place. You can always just send me a good old fashioned email, jim at manufacturingculturepodcast.com. And yeah, looking forward to connecting with anybody who listens to this. If anybody listens to this and wants to reach out, please do. I'd love to just have conversations. This is what I love to do. Just like Zach loves having these conversations, I do too. That's why he and I got along so well from literally the minute we started chatting.
Yeah, it didn't take long. It didn't take
No,
long, Jim.
not at all.
No. But we will link all of that below. Check out his podcast. I was on it. He has a lot of other great episodes on there. And again, we'll link all those things below. Let's blow up his podcast so he can start focusing on his passion projects. Jim, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Summit Chasers podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed, you were inspired, you learned something that you can use to go and chase whatever your next summit may be. Be sure to like and comment your takeaways from the episode below. Also, follow us on all social media platforms under Summit Chasers Network. And if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to turn on your notifications so you can be notified when we drop new content like how-to videos, business best practices, motivation, and personal development strategies. And until next time, keep chasing your summit. I'll see you on the next one.